Look around you for a second. Whether you are sitting in your living room or, commuting in your car or even just out for a walk.
You probably feel pretty grounded.
Exactly. I mean, you see solid objects, you feel the chair underneath you, the floor beneath your feet. You're in a normal physical space.
Which makes total sense.
Right. But what if I told you that, according to the sources we are unpacking today, that is a complete and total illusion?
A very persistent illusion.
Yeah. What if, right at this very moment, you are actually standing on the floor of an infinite fractal river?
It is, it's a profoundly disorienting premise to start with, for sure.
It really is. And that's our mission for today's deep dive. We are going to unpack a highly unconventional, incredibly dense theoretical manuscript.
Dense is putting it lightly.
Right. And it attempts to seamlessly merge cosmology, quantum physics, and theology into one unified theory of reality.
The author is basically proposing a complete teardown of how we perceive the universe.
And we're digging into this because the manuscript attempts to answer some of the biggest structural questions imaginable. I mean, we're going to explore the author's arguments for why time exists.
Yes.
Why matter holds together instead of just, flying apart. And most importantly for you, the listener, why your entire perception of reality is fundamentally limited by your own biological frame rate.
Yeah, to even begin to grasp this whole infinite fractal river concept, the text requires us to completely discard, literally throw away, everything we assume about matter and empty space.
Which is hard to do.
Very. Because the traditional view is that the universe is basically a giant vacuum, right? With chunks of stuff like planets, stars, people just floating around in it.
But the author insists that's wrong.
Fundamentally wrong, yes.
And the manuscript is very explicit about one thing right off the bat, which is this river is not a metaphor.
Yeah.
It's not poetry. The author argues that an infinite river is the most precise, literal, physical model for what creation actually is.
Right. In the model presented here, what we call matter, energy, and empty space, they aren't different substances.
Okay.
They're the exact same infinite field. So the conceptual shift here is viewing a solid rock and the empty air around it not as different things.
Wait, really? Not different things at all?
No, they're the same continuous field, just operating at different ratio sizes or densities.
Mm-hmm.
The text actually refers to matter as an accumulation of infinity.
Okay, let me stop you there, because accumulation of infinity is a phrase that can easily make a reader's eyes glaze over.
Fair enough, yeah.
If it's all the exact same continuous field, why do I see a coffee cup sitting on a desk as a separate object? Like, why does the universe look like it is full of discrete individual things?
The author attributes this entirely to what they call a temporal resolution limit.
A resolution limit.
Yeah. The argument is that we perceive things as separate only because they're finite creatures, right? Measuring a continuous infinite gradient through a limited biological window. If you think about the field twisting or packing itself into denser knots, we basically only register the knots.
So think about it like looking at a highly compressed digital photograph on your computer screen.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, if you zoom all the way in, you see blocky, separate pixels. A discrete red square next to a discrete blue square. They look like individual unconnected things.
Right.
But if you had the original uncompressed, infinite raw data of the universe, it wouldn't be boxes. It would be a perfectly continuous, infinite gradient of color melting into itself.
Exactly.
We just lack the resolution to see the gradient, so our brains render the universe in blocky pixels.
That digital compression analogy perfectly mirrors what the text means when it describes the banks of this infinite river.
The banks, like riverbanks.
Right. But when the author talks about a riverbank, they do not mean a physical edge of dirt where the water stops and dry land begins.
Because it's infinite.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In an infinite field, there is no dry land. A bank simply marks a ratio boundary. It's the exact threshold where one density of infinity meets another density of infinity at a rate that causes a measurable shift in our perception.
So if our perception is bounded by these banks, and we're floating in this infinite river of varying densities, what does the architecture of our observable universe actually look like from the inside?
Well, the manuscript provides a very specific, almost architectural geometry for the observer. The author posits that we are quite literally standing on the floor of the river.
A floor?
Yes. And in this framework, the floor is matter. Matter is defined as the structure that resolves exactly at our observable biological rate.
And the text defines our rate as 1 second per second, right?
It does, yeah.
I have to admit, when I first read that, it sounded like a tautology. Like 1 second per second is just, normal time.
Sure.
What does that physically mean in the context of this river?
Well, the phrase 1 second per second is used by the author to describe our specific biological and cognitive refresh rate. It's the speed at which our chemical reactions, our neuronal firing, our consciousness, the speed at which we process causality.
So it's literally our frame rate.
Precisely. The text treats this as a perceptual floor. We can see, touch, and interact with anything that shares that exact frame rate.
And anything else.
Anything vibrating or accumulating below that floor is the exact same infinite field, but it's operating at finer ratio differences than our natural perception can catch.
Meaning it looks like empty space to us, or, well, we just can't see it without help.
Right. You cannot perceive below the floor without assistive technology. Science, in this theoretical framework, is just an observable being mapping the infinite river from the floor.
That's wild.
Yeah, every electron microscope, every particle accelerator is essentially just an instrument extending our biological resolution band slightly downward.
Downward into the denser, faster currents of the river.
Exactly.
Okay, so if our perception is bounded at the bottom by this floor of matter, this 1 second per second frame rate, it implies a limit at the top end too, right?
It absolutely does.
What happens when matter accelerates so fast it breaks out of that limit? Like, what is the ceiling above our heads?
The author identifies the ceiling of this observable river as a black hole.
Okay, I'm struggling with the black hole concept here.
I don't blame you.
Because, conventional physics tells us a black hole is a crushing singularity. It's an area of space where gravity is so intense that nothing can escape, a region that basically obliterates matter.
That's the standard model, yes.
So how can this text possibly argue it's just a ceiling in a river?
Because the manuscript radically redefines the event horizon. The author argues a black hole is not a wall, and it is certainly not an empty void.
Then what is it?
It's a perceptual null.
A perceptual null.
Yeah. The text proposes that as matter accelerates toward a black hole, that acceleration isn't linear. It's exponential. And as matter speeds up, it doesn't get crushed. It actually meets less observable opposition.
Wait, so it becomes almost frictionless relative to our perception.
According to the mechanics laid out in the document, yes.
Wow.
When that exponential curve steepens beyond what our biological measuring system can track. So when matter hits an observable rate of, say, 2 seconds per second, the observable opposition drops to zero.
So it just vanishes.
The matter hasn't been destroyed. It has simply exited our readable field entirely. Because we're stuck outside looking in with our 1 second per second cameras, that departure just reads to us as absence.
Just darkness.
Exactly. Darkness.
That means the black hole is not empty space. It is completely full.
Yes.
It's overflowing with matter that has nowhere to resolve to because it has exceeded the readability of our universe's processing speed.
That is exactly the argument.
It just went dark to us, like a propeller spinning so fast it becomes invisible.
That's a perfect analogy. The text classifies the black hole as a special kind of bank. It's a ceiling boundary you can approach and cross.
Okay.
This is contrasted with the lateral banks of the river, which the author aligns with the speed of light.
Right, because the speed of light is the maximum readable rate of causal propagation. The text actually points out that if you go beyond the speed of light, you would be measuring effects before their causes even happened.
Which means the map just runs out.
Yeah.
The text argues you can travel forever at sublight speeds, and that lateral bank, the speed of light, remains exactly as far away as when you started. It's an unapproachable boundary.
But the black hole is different.
Yes, the black hole ceiling is a bank you can fall through, but return is structurally impossible.
Because you can't hit the brakes once you cross over?
Right. The author's logic is that once you cross into that unobservable interior, you carry your unresolved velocity with you. You cannot climb back down the rate differential to our 1 second per second floor.
Why not?
To do so, you'd have to resolve through the same threshold from the inside, which the text argues has no physical mechanism.
Huh.
The source states the only hypothetical way out would be a tunnel that bypasses the rate differential entirely, connecting 2 points in the observable field without passing through the unobservable interior.
Okay, let's make sure we're painting this picture clearly for everyone listening. The manuscript claims we are standing on the floor of an infinite river, which is matter.
Yes.
Above us is a ceiling of black holes, where matter accelerates out of our biological perception.
Correct.
Surrounding us are infinite lateral banks defined by the speed of light, where causality itself hits its readable limit.
That's the geometry.
This entire system is governed by infinite forces moving at exponential speeds.
It is. The architecture is vast, and it implies an environment of unimaginable kinetic violence.
Which naturally leads to the next massive problem.
Yes, it does.
If we are submerged in this infinite, exponentially accelerating force, why aren't we instantly vaporized? How do our bodies or planets or even molecules survive this environment?
The text addresses this through a concept it calls the fill without breaking constraint. And this is actually the pivot point where the cosmological physics starts to weave intimately with the author's theological assertions.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah. The manuscript acknowledges that this infinite field is perfectly capable of breaking every structure it inhabits.
Right. I mean, if the pressure of an infinite river increased even a fraction of a percent at any scale, everything would collapse.
Completely. Cavity walls would fracture, grain boundaries in rocks would blow open, micro channels would be ripped into macro channels. The physical structure of the universe would instantly cease to exist.
But it doesn't.
No. But the author observes that the water does not do this. Instead, the water fills to the exact tolerance of every cavity at every scale simultaneously.
I was really trying to visualize this while reading the notes. Imagine taking an industrial infinite psi pressure washer, like the kind they use to slice through solid titanium, and pointing it directly at a delicate morning dew-covered spider web.
An incredibly fragile structure subjected to an overwhelming force.
Right. Now imagine that instead of obliterating the web instantly, the water from the pressure washer automatically calibrates its force, atom by atom, microsecond by microsecond.
It's a striking image.
It fills every tiny gap, every microscopic silk thread with infinite pressure, but it dynamically holds back just enough so that not a single strand snaps. It fills the space perfectly without breaking the structure.
The manuscript describes exactly this dynamic. Furthermore, the author is careful to point out that this calibration is not passivity.
It's not just sitting there.
No, the water isn't just resting there gently. The text argues this is the most demanding form of precision imaginable. It requires an active holding of force just below the fracture threshold, across every scale of the universe at once, continuously.
And goes all the way down.
All the way down.
The text notes that this fill terminates at microhomogeny, which is an analog for the Planck scale.
Yes.
And for those who might not, spend their weekends reading quantum physics, the Planck scale is generally considered the smallest measurable unit of distance in the universe. Scientists often view it as the ultimate pixel size of reality.
And the author reframes the Planck scale quite beautifully, honestly.
So?
The text argues, this scale isn't where the universe simply runs out of room. It is the exact depth where the distinction between cavity and contents collapses.
Wow.
It's the point where the very concept of a wall ceases to exist, meaning there's no longer a physical boundary to define the water against.
And this mechanism, this dynamic, non-breaking pressure, is where the text introduces its core theological argument.
It is. The manuscript proposes that this perfectly calibrated constraint is the literal physical manifestation of what theologians mean when they say God does not express his totality.
So it's not a metaphor either.
No. The author's stance is not that God is suppressed, distant, or watching from outside the universe. The argument is that the infinite force is meticulously, painstakingly calibrated to the exact structural limit of everything, everywhere, in real time.
Okay, so we've mapped out the hidden mechanics, the architecture of the river, and this infinite force being dynamically restrained so it doesn't destroy the spiderweb. But how does the author connect this hidden, perfectly calibrated constraint to the macroscopic physical world we actually observe when we walk outside?
To bridge that gap, the source asks the reader to consider the formation of a canyon.
A canyon.
Yeah. The text states bluntly, a weak river carves nothing.
Yeah, when human beings look at a massive canyon, like the Grand Canyon, our intuition tells us we're looking at a historical record of destruction.
Sure, we see billions of gallons of water smashing rock away over millions of years.
Exactly. We equate massive power with obliteration.
But the author completely inverts that human intuition. The manuscript argues that the canyon is actually a record of what the force chose not to do at the walls.
The idea is that if the river unleashed its full infinite power, there wouldn't be a canyon.
No, the whole continent would be gone.
Right.
The precise fractal edges of the cliff faces, the delicate undercuts, the sweeping river valleys, The author claims these aren't just where the water happened to stop.
Then what are they?
They are the exact historical record of the force that was present but intentionally withheld. The shape of the physical world is the precise history of how much infinite force was held back at each point over each duration.
So the strength is implied by the massive scale of the canyon, but the restraint is expressed by the exquisite precision of the edges.
Yes, and the author insists this principle applies at every scale of reality.
Okay.
At the geological scale, you see it in a continental drainage system. Zoom in to the macroscopic scale, and you see it in the capillary fractures of a pebble. Zoom into the quantum scale, and it dictates the boundary condition of every subatomic particle.
You know, I found myself questioning the logic here regarding scale.
How come?
Well, because as you zoom in, things get exponentially more fragile, right? A quantum boundary condition is infinitely more delicate than a granite cliff face.
True.
Doesn't this imply that as you zoom into the quantum level, this God figure gets smaller or less powerful to avoid breaking the tiny structures?
It's a great question, but the text anticipates that exact critique and argues the opposite.
Really?
Yeah, the manuscript states explicitly that the infinite force does not diminish at smaller scales. Instead, the precision scales with the fragility of the structure.
Oh, I see.
The deeper you go, the more fragile the architecture. The more fragile the architecture, the more exact the restraint required to fill it without breaking it.
That makes a lot of sense.
The author's theological conclusion is that the quantum scale isn't where God is least present. It is where the calibration must be the most profound.
Man, it's a staggering argument the author is making here, proposing that the most profound expression of infinite power is actually microscopic restraint holding a single atom intact.
It's beautiful, really.
It is. So we have the architecture of the river, and we have this exquisite constraint carving the universe. What is the ultimate engine driving all this? Like, why does any of this sequence happen at all?
Well, to explain the engine driving the universe, the source forces a redefinition of two concepts we take for granted every single day.
Which are?
Patience and time.
Usually we think of patience as waiting, passivity, a lack of action, like, standing in line at the grocery store or sitting in traffic.
Exactly. But in the framework of this manuscript, the carving of the canyon is an intensely active process. The water isn't resting.
Right.
The author defines patience not as sitting still, but as moving at full force, while simultaneously holding oneself below the fracture threshold of every surface touched.
And the text leans heavily into a specific theological term here, kenosis,
Yeah.
the self-emptying of God.
The author argues that kenosis is not a diminishment or a weakening of the divine. Operating at full force inside a finite structure by calibrating exactly to its tolerance, that restraint is the only condition under which the sculpture of reality becomes possible.
Wow.
The text uses a very striking phrase to summarize this. It says, "The withheld torrent is the artist."
The withheld torrent is the artist. That is incredible. And so that brings us to the final piece of the puzzle.
It does.
If causality is just the sequence of this calibration holding together microsecond by microsecond, then the output of that withheld torrent is time itself.
Exactly. Time is presented not as a pre-existing dimension that things happen inside of, but as this...
Output, not a container.
Right. Causality, the fact that a dropped glass shatters rather than turning into a bird, is literally the shape of that active patience expressed as a sequence.
Okay, if I am tracking the logic of the manuscript correctly, if this exact continuous calibration breaks anywhere at any scale, causality fractures at that point.
Yes.
If the pressure slips and exceeds the tolerance of the cavity, the machine built across billions of years of patient structure filling simply vaporizes.
It would just be gone.
So the author is claiming that our reality only continues from one second to the next because that infinite pressure is being perfectly restrained right now in every atom of the universe.
That is the ultimate thesis of the document. The text argues that neither time nor causality is a limitation placed upon God. They are the visible outputs of God moving at full precision through the structure of reality.
Unreal.
The universe, according to this manuscript, is quite literally the exact shape that God's patience has carved.
Let's take a breath and bring this massive theoretical journey back to ground level for you listening right now.
That's a lot to take in.
It really is. We started with the author's claim that you aren't sitting in an empty room but standing on the floor of an infinite fractal river.
Right.
We mapped out how the text redefines black holes and the speed of light as biological resolution limits thresholds where matter simply accelerates out of our frame rate.
Yes.
We explored the idea that the physical world is a record of infinite force dynamically choosing not to destroy us.
The canyon analogy.
Exactly. And finally, we unpacked the argument that the passing of time, every second you experience today, is the sound of infinite patience holding reality together without breaking it.
It is a framework that fundamentally attempts to change how an observer views their own existence. The manuscript suggests you are standing on the floor of the observable universe, supported by an exquisite calibration happening at quantum scales you cannot even see.
And that brings us to one final, incredibly provocative thought straight from the text that I want to leave you with.
Let's hear it.
We spent a lot of time discussing our specific temporal resolution limit, our biological refresh rate of 1 second per second.
Right.
Well, the author notes that a hypothetical observer operating at a higher rate would resolve finer ratio differences, meaning their Planck floor would be lower.
Oh, wow.
They would perceive solid, complex architecture in places where our human brains just render empty, undifferentiated space.
Because the infinite field is always fully present everywhere. We just process it through a narrow finite window.
So I want you to look around that room you're in one more time. If your entire reality, everything you consider solid and real, is dictated entirely by your biological processing speed, what massive, impossibly complex universes of structure might be sitting right in front of your face, completely invisible, just waiting for a higher frame rate to see them? You think you're just sitting there. But the text suggests the river is rushing right through you. Think about that the next time you look at empty space.